Good morning again, everybody, and really delighted to be up talking about the restaurant of the future. A bit of backstory, I suppose, maybe a bit different from the future that we heard about yesterday morning. What I'm quite keen and have been quite keen to do is make sure that we think about the immediate future of 2 to 3 years rather than potentially 20 years or the kind of navel-gazing piece. So just to set the scene, very much about what you need to be thinking about now in your kind of 3-year strategy cycle. To give you a background, I'm involved in running an event in the UK called Restaurant Marketer and Innovator, and we're really pleased to be able to partner with the team at Bench Events in terms of these 2 events. We attracted about 750 people from around the world who are mainly marketing and kind of the thinking professionals behind restaurant groups. And one of the sections of that conference, which is what I'm going to present to you today, we were looking to try and understand what a number of very different viewpoints thought about what we had in store as a sector in terms of the restaurant space. So I set a group of people a mission. I asked them to define what we can expect in a restaurant of the future, again, thinking 3 to 5 years, and thinking about movement on of current trends, and not to kind of think too wildly at this point. They had 4 hours to do it. We locked them down in a room, and it literally was a lockdown. We gave them coffee, so that helped. And then we released them to give their output live on stage. And one slight twist, I'm not sure if you know Jay Rayner, but Jay Rayner is one of the most, how do we put this? Outspoken, there we go, great word, restaurant critics, potentially in the world. And if you want to follow him on Twitter, you'll understand what we mean if you don't know him very quickly. So I actually didn't tell them that he was doing this ahead of time. So it was on the morning I told them that what they'd come up with, he was going to be on stage grilling them on. And it was a great opportunity to really put their thought process to the test. So it worked very well for us. These were the people that were on that panel and presenting, and we had Russell Danks, who's a bit of a futurist, leading it, Professor Charles Spence, who's an experimental psychologist at the University of Oxford, and do take down his name and go and look at his stuff. If you want to look at the kind of future-gazing stuff, he's definitely the person to read. He's got books. He talks about the weight of cutlery affecting the experience. He talks about the color of dishes relating to whether or not things create certain emotional reactions, which I know was talked about yesterday quite intrinsically. We then had Paul Hiskins, who was from Coca-Cola, and we really wanted someone with a product specialism background. He used to be in charge of development and kind of the whole inspiration piece within Coca-Cola Europe, so that was a really interesting angle. We then had Ben Carter, who was a marketer, who's the head of marketing for Just Eat, and he was really there from that kind of viewpoint of thinking about the broader sector and potentially a little bit of a technology piece. We had Morris, who's a restaurateur from K10, who's a very, very, how would you put it, he's a very traditional restaurateur, and that was important to us. We had that representation. We had Peter Edwards, who was, sorry, that's actually the word, from Zonal, so a technology piece, and Josef Youssef, who's a molecular gastronomist, and he works with, he runs an entity called Kitchen Theory. But between these people, they all came with a very individual thought process ahead of time, and we asked from the very beginning for them to come with their thoughts. And the work in that 4 hours was about those guys who all have very different views on what that was going to be, arguing it out to a point where there was some agreement of what they were presenting on stage. And do you know what? The outcome wasn't, as I said, this amazing, like, wow, it's going to be flying spaceships and drones delivering your food. What it was, from my perspective, is a very robust overview of that, as I said, 3 to 5 year strategy and what you ought to do. They broke it down into a number of areas, and we had this live illustrated as they went through the 4 hours. And the first one was the research and booking stage. So the first piece was this food state need piece. And do you know what? It's things we've heard again and again, but it is really important. It's the very basis of how we work and how we think as consumers. Actually, it's not all about experiences, and we talk about all about experiences, but the reality is that if it's a convenience occasion, and if you are starving or hungover, it's a very different thing than an experience. It's probably the outcome of an experience rather than the experience in itself. So that idea of being able to kind of curate dining and food-related experiences per se, but to a food state need, was really, really quite clear in what they were doing. The second one was this gastronomic passport, and this is probably the thing that I think is most prevalent and something we will see. We all got bombarded on LinkedIn with the blockchain stuff and all of this data piece, and we all think, what the hell's going on here? I have no idea. But I think what will happen, realistically, is there will be the development over a period of time that will mean that we as an individual can set what our preferences are, what our allergies are, who we are, and all of those things, so that ahead of time, within some environment, a restaurant, when I'm going there, knows who I am. So I don't need to, when I'm logging on into a website or making a booking online, I don't need to keep putting all my allergies, don't need to say that my wife doesn't like fish or lamb. That stuff will automatically be known and will be managed and curated by a restaurant. I think that's very realistic in terms of what's going to happen. What's interesting with that, the question is who is going to do that? So whilst, and what will be required from my perspective is a coming together in one way or another, and commerciality will mean it's very likely to be one player. I mean, I'm in a position where I think someone like Just Eat or Deliveroo or one of these big players, when they have an audience, they have a very large audience. The reality is they have people's details and they have their app downloaded on lots of people's phones. Could be TripAdvisor, it could be, but ultimately you've got to have a large mass audience to be able to be the person that drives this forward. And someone will do that. And it strikes me so far that we've been very lucky that we haven't seen any of these guys move into the payment piece at the end of dining. We haven't seen those people necessarily move into your in-restaurant experience, and that is coming. If I'm sitting as the ownership of one of those big companies, and I've got the kind of losses that Deliveroo are making, and I think, well, actually, I could probably take another 3% on everybody's in-restaurant income, I'm definitely coming for you, and I think that's going to come one way or another. The last piece there is about surge pricing, and I don't know whether many of you have seen, but certainly in the UK we've had 2 restaurants now, quite kind of higher end restaurants, who are now offering a surge pricing model, like an airline, and I think this is coming too. So they offer 50% off at lunchtime, and it literally throughout the week goes from Monday lunchtime at 50% off to Friday and Saturday night at 120%, I think it works at. And I think we will see more and more of this. And actually, why will we see more of it is because I think as operators, frankly, we can't keep creating lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of different menus. I think the reality is what we'll see is a proposition and an understanding from consumers that depending on the time of week that you come and the time of year you come, that may look different and the pricing may be different. Obviously, the only kind of key question around that is, as a sector, is how saturated we are and what that looks like in terms of how relevant that's going to be in the lower and mid-market, I think, is questionable. The next piece is concept and design. And I think that we know the whole integrating food into the experience piece. But again, I think, and it's odd, I didn't necessarily want this to all be technology, but I think a lot of it is. I think there's integrating food into the experience in terms of being able to utilize technology to understand more around what you're doing, but also the other way as well. I think the use of, we're seeing, and particularly the guys that are doing the psychology stuff on this panel, doing a lot of work around the use of color, music, sensory stuff in terms of smells. And I had a really great opportunity last year to head to Vegas and see the back end of one of the big casinos and how they operate, and looking at the way that they change all those things, the lighting, the piece on music, the oxygen in the room, the smells they pump into the room, all of that stuff is managed. And I think on a big scale, it's still a lot of investment, but I think that there will be smaller versions of that coming down the pipeline. And the second one there is flexible modular design. I think we'll see more use of people trying to get more out of their venues, particularly where space is an issue. So in central cities, I think we'll start, and we are seeing individual units being used in different ways throughout the day. So different concepts in the same unit. I think this stuff's going to be really interesting and something to watch out for. Now, online, offline brand presence, again, this is much more than about tweeting and about Instagram. It's about having something that becomes synonymous with you, and a kind of an ability to communicate with your customers no matter where they are and no matter what they're doing. And as we interact with them more on different levels about different things rather than just the dining experience in our restaurant, I think this is going to become more prevalent and important. The food type and style, customizable experience isn't new. I think, though, that, anyone that's from the US or knows the US market, there's some amazing data out there about huge percentages of people that, in terms of percentages of orders that are changed and customized. We're seeing that to a degree in the UK, and certainly the 36 million allergies that you have to work to, it certainly mean that that's increasing. But I think that we're going to see this continue to move forward. And again, with technology, you're probably going to be able to predetermine some of that too. I think the key, though, and they were very, very driven to say that they think there's a real key balance between automation and service. Are we going to have robot waiting staff anytime soon? I really don't think so. I think, frankly, we are a people business, and it's as everyone said over the last couple of days, we're a people business, and that's really integral to what we do. But in terms of the automation, I think we're going to see far more of that in the back of house. I think we're going to see far more of that in the way that we operate in terms of the way we use customer data. I don't necessarily think we're going to see much of it in the experience piece. Maybe in the convenience side, we'll see more pre-ordering, we'll see more of the tablet type scenario in venues that we've seen obviously take off with McDonald's, but I'm not sure it's going to really flow into full service. And then well-trained staff adding value. I know it's odd that we have to put this on something about the future, but frankly, it's interesting, actually. I've been coming to Dubai for 4 or 5 years for this conference now, and every time I come back, it really strikes me that this is one of the key issues here. It's a key issue in the Middle East, is this kind of slightly robotic nature of service that you see quite broadly. And actually, you'd assume things would get better over time, and frankly, I don't think it has at all. If anything, I think it's probably got worse, as far as I can see. I think, and that may be because of this increase in venues, and that's maybe not been matched by the training spend and the nationality mix, but it's a big issue, and it's a big issue within the UK, it's a big issue globally, that we have to, as a sector, take more responsibility to train people effectively. And this isn't tactical skill-based training. It's about training people's mindsets and getting people in a space where they really understand why they're doing what they're doing and what that means. Managing click and collect versus eating in, I think we're already seeing this issue. I've been involved in concepts where we've created secondary doors. We've had scenarios where there's very good grab-and-go scenarios within a full-service restaurant. This stuff's happening, and we need to embrace it. And again, this is not new, but it is something that people aren't necessarily embracing. It's very easy to put your head in the sand and not think about it. Payment and follow-up. I think we all know that payment is the biggest challenge in terms of that service flow, frankly. And who likes to leave a restaurant having just spent a huge amount of money, and that last experience, that last transaction being one of money? I don't think any of us do, really. In fact, on a very simplified level, I was in Flatiron in London, which is an amazing concept. Charlie and the team there have done a really good job. And one of the things they've done really well is the last thing that you get is a little voucher. They tell you to go and see someone by the door, and they give you free ice cream on the way out. And I tell you what, I walked away with a smile, because who doesn't smile with ice cream? That's the truth, eh? And actually, it's costing them 20 odd pence a piece. And it's the best thing that I think I've seen in a London restaurant. You get a steak meal for two for 60, 70 quid with a nice bottle of red wine, ice cream on the way out, and you were in and out within an hour. Hell, like, who wouldn't want that? I think there's the friction-free payment stuff. We've seen Prezzo and Barclaycard, take those names down. Prezzo in the UK, it's been the last 2 weeks that's come up, and that's really, really coming through at the moment. The real-time follow-up, I've given you feedback, I've tweeted, we heard about from somebody yesterday who said that this is happening in the US, and that you need to follow up there and then with that. And I think that, again, this kind of curating experiences, this isn't about waiting 2 days or 3 days to follow up a review. It's about dealing with it there and then. But do you know what? I've trialed this in 6 restaurants, and the issue is, unless you've got the training right with the managers, it's bloody creepy, and you've got to be careful. I've had a scenario where I watched a manager get the text message on their phone saying, table 7 have just given you a shit service score. And what did he do? He went over and went, oh, I'm just wondering what went wrong tonight. I'm like, no, please. But do you know what? The two go together. Technology does not work without effective training. The last one, in-home dining. This is, as we've heard again, it's becoming more and more important. This automated delivery and service, the anxiety, that's the main issue at the moment, is you click on that delivery and you don't really know when the hell it's going to turn up. And I think this has got to be overcome, and we are going to see people doing that more. And I think there'll also be really interesting movements in terms of the ranging of food for different occasions and what that looks like. I think we're seeing a lot of movement into the corporate space in terms of taking space in the corporate dining. If I was in the event space right now, I'd be really worried about the shoddy service that event caterers often provide because of this space in terms of not sporting venues, but in terms of conference type venues. I think that's a really interesting area. So that's really what we spent, or they spent 4 hours doing, and Jay Rayner ripped apart. Although he did give us one really nice nugget, which was nice. He said that he felt that in the UK we had the most inspirational mid-market, but that mid-market is obviously coming under increasing pressure. But I do think it's an area that we do very well in the UK. So that's that. I'm James Hacon, and I'll see you in a little while. Thank you.